Where's Fielder?
He's gone to the dogs.
Welcome once again, friends. Steve Fielder here with you on the Gone to the Dogs podcast. It's been a good week down here in the sunny South, and I'm proud to have my longtime friend and soon-to-be more frequent visitor to the Gone to the Dogs podcast, Corey Gruber. How you doing, Corey?
I'm doing good, Steve. I'm glad that you didn't say more than friends.
No, there's so many ways I could go with that, but I'm going to just let that lay right where it is.
Yes, sir.
You know, I don't know why it's been going through my head all day. I was thinking about my buddies down there in South Carolina that have the coon hunting confidentials, you know.
Yeah.
And I just thought it would be fun to spoof those guys, but they're so funny. I probably would just fall flat on my face. But Daniel, this is the Coon Hunting Confidentials on the Houndstooth Podcast Network.
There's something about that Southern charm that when the further north you get, the it's a lot more lackluster in the humor department. Trust me.
Oh, we're going to start that old war over again. You are north of the Mason-Dixon line.
Yes, sir.
I, my friends, was born south of the Mason-Dixon line. Although my great state of West Virginia did go with the north, you know, so.
And we thank
June
you.
20th, 1863. How about that? That's when they became part of the Union. And as far as I know, they still are.
Well, that's a relief. So what are we getting into today, Steve? What do you got planned for us?
Well, Corey, the one thing I wanted to do is tell the listeners that you are going to be here more frequently than ever. And hopefully as many podcasts as possible. Sometimes in life, we come to the realization that we need help. I remember my UKC days when my field reps went to my boss and said, "Hey, Fielder needs help. He's drowning in a world of coonhound events." And, you know, and thankfully he took that to heart, and we brought some more people into the field operations department, which is what we called it back in those days. So in thinking about it, you know, I love this. I love doing it. I was talking with Jason Doobie today with W Hunting Supply and, of course, Full Cry Magazine. By the way, did you notice the chapeau I have on here tonight?
I did. That Full Cry trucker
Isn't
hat
that
is
cool?
looking good.
One of those old trucker hats, the foam front, you know, with the Full Cry logo. I scored that down at the Grand American, man. I kind of like that. It's retro.
Oh, yeah. It looks good.
Yeah. But anyway, you know, just thinking about I was talking to Jason, that's where I was going. And he said, "How do you do it every week? You know, get these guests and all this lineup and stuff every week, week in, week out." I find that hard to do. He said, "Well, of course, he's got a lot of hats. He's wearing a lot of hats that I'm not wearing, you know, with his day job with DU and then the Full Cry Magazine, which his wife Danny is editing, and you're doing a lot of work with those guys too." And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. But anyway, I thought, you know, it would be a lot better physically on this old voice and mentally on trying to come up with something to talk about all the time, and from the listener's standpoint, a lot more entertaining if we had some back and forth, some give and take, you know, some actual conversations. And then that came up today as Jason and I were talking about how the conversations probably are the way for podcasts to go more so than the guest route. That, you know, sometimes guests are interesting. Sometimes they're, you know, it seems like, you know, the last one sounds like the one before.
Yeah.
And so that's all, part of this podcasting thing. But anyway, I'm going to do what I set out to do, and that's to shut up and let you do more talking. But Corey, I'm really glad that you're going to be with me here each week.
I'm really glad that you invited me to come help you with the podcast. I'm looking forward to serving in this co-hosting role, if you'll call it that. To put it in layman's terms, folks, it's a lot like when you have a really good pair of coon dogs in your backyard, and one's a little bit better at tracking than it is treeing, and one's a little bit better at treeing than it is tracking. That's what Steve and I are going to be. We're going to be the dynamic duo that covers all the bases that we need to put some fur in the back of the truck, so to speak. So
yeah, we're the Laurel and Hardy for you real old people that remember the silent movies. Maybe Frick and Frack.
Beavis and Butthead.
Nah, you nailed it. That was the next one I was going to say.
Oh, there's so many.
That's a show I never did get. That came along after me. That was during my son's era. Yeah. I never did quite get it. Now, I did find some humor in The Simpsons. And we have I'm always kidding with my wife. She's got a great sense of humor, and she's lots quicker than I am, and always was. But I tell her every Christmas we go out to Home Depot or Lowe's or some big box store, and they have all these Christmas blow-ups, the blow-up deals you put on your lawn. Well, she kind of has a standing rule, no blow-ups. And I said, but there's one that I'm looking for that I really want, and if I can find it, we're getting it. And that's Bart Simpson in his underwear smoking a cigar. Now, that is a blow-up that I want on my lawn.
Well, I'll tell you, so number one, Steve's invited me to come on and fulfill kind of a co-hosting role to alleviate his beautiful speaking voice that he has. Kind of in a part two to that is my work with Full Cry. Full Cry is going to have some cool announcements coming out here in the next month or so about some things they're going to be doing in the world of podcasting. And that's a project that I'm working on closely with Jason Doobie. And we should have a podcast coming out here in the next few weeks that kind of outlines all of that. And basically, I'm just getting my feet wet in this whole podcasting world. I've been asked, by Jason and by you to help out and kind of serve these different but similar roles as far as bringing content to our fandom, if you want to call them that. And I'm looking
dumb fans. You called our fans dumb?
No. I was misquoted.
Oh, excuse me.
Fake news. I didn't call anybody dumb. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I if there's one thing I'm good at, it's speaking. It's filling the airwaves, and Steve knows that I'm full of hot air. So I'm glad. My wife is super appreciative of it because I think she's gotten a little tired of trying to have conversations with me about coon hunting and stuff like that. So this will be a good outlet for
me. Yeah, Corey, as hard as we try, most of our mates, our spouses, don't really get it. They kind of tolerate it, but they don't, I remember taking Ella coon hunting and I asked her if she wanted to go again. No, I'm good. I'm good.
I think that well dried up with my wife when we got engaged, honestly. She was pretty good about going coon hunting once in a blue moon when
they get the hook in,
Well,
once they got the hook in.
Once you're a fish on a platter, there's no sport.
That's right. Well, needless to say, I'm really excited about it. I think that the show is definitely going to improve. the content, and that's what they say we are. If you put a label on us, we are content creators in this wide world of podcasting. It's funny, 3 or 4 years ago when I sat behind a microphone for the first time, I barely knew what a podcast was,
Yeah.
you know. But
You've come a long way, Steve. I'll give you that. You've come a long way.
well,
I did have to teach Steve how to open an internet browser earlier. Maybe not an internet browser, but a tab. I had to
a
show him how
tab,
to
right? Well, my computer experience has all been self-taught.
Yeah.
I learned like the old country musician. I play by ear.
Yeah.
Well, I always sang by letter.
Okay.
I used to sing in church, and I said I sing by letter instead of note. I just open my mouth and let her fly. So,
Well, in the immortal words of my Canadian friend Red Green, this is temporary unless it works.
Right. Yeah. I am a man. I can change if I want to. I guess. Man, I'm a big Red Green fan. I go back and watch this on YouTube. I love Red Green. Possum Hollow Lodge, right?
Talk about wholesome content. You know what I mean? Yeah. You don't find that anymore.
If the women don't find you handsome, at least let them find you handy, right? Oh, well, it's going to be fun, Corey. Already, it's a lot of fun for me just to think about the prospects of what we might be able to accomplish for the sport of coon hunting, because that's what we both love for some reason. We've been infected by the bug, as they say, and hey, this week was a pretty busy week. Week before was the big Joy Super Hunt, and as we're recording this, the podcast with Randy Smith and John Strickland is airing, as we say, and I think it's a pretty good podcast. Did you get a chance to listen to it at all?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I'm fortunate enough that being from Pennsylvania, I know Randy real well. And, with my work at UKC, I got to know Cody Carter very well as he was kind of coming into his own as a competition handler. And, of course, he's the son-in-law of UKC field representative Doug Cundiff. And Doug's a great guy. And his dad was a field rep. Great guy. That's a whole dynasty.
Charlie.
Yeah,
my buddy Charlie.
Yep. Whole dynasty in and of itself. And so I followed that very closely just because of those connections. Unfortunately, I didn't have as many connections with the dog that had won the PKC World Championship. But nonetheless,
I enjoyed Tank 2 dog.
Yeah, I enjoyed the whole kit and caboodle. I thought it was really well put on.
Oh yeah, I think the video quality was really top drawer, and and communicating a little with Josh Michaelis afterwards, he said, we're not there yet, but we're getting closer, and I think that's the attitude that'll make it, truly a great endeavor, is that they're striving for perfection. We may not reach it, but they certainly set the bar high. And I think it appears that the addition of another Pennsylvanian there, Ben Sheets, from over, I understand he's maybe from Eastern PA, but Ben does some podcasting. And is it Tree Dog Time or Tree? I can't remember.
Tree Dog Media.
Excuse me, Ben. I had been on the podcast from Autumn Oaks a couple of years ago, and great guy and very talented. And so, that's another example of Josh reaching out to somebody, to give him a hand And the result, you can see.
Yeah. Well, Ben is actually, he's a fantastic writer, first and foremost. And I think that anybody that's going to work in any kind of communication field has to be a good writer. I mean, everything that we communicate to anybody, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, starts in our head, right? And that's the best writers. That's where they bring their content from. It's just deep within their subconscious. And if you have a chance, I'm going to give Ben a little plug here. Read the material he's putting out in the Full Crime magazine. He's putting out some awesome articles. He's got a unique perspective on how he approaches some of these stories that he puts in there. And just a fantastic guy and a fantastic writer doing great things for our sport.
Well, Corey, I don't want to blow your head up here, but that was the thing that got my attention when you were at UKC, is I read some of the stuff that you were writing. I thought it was very good. And well, if you're an expressive creative person and you want to express your ideas and all, writing is, the old saying we used to say about the Coonhound ads, paper will sit still for anything. So you can put it down, but yeah, I agree with you. That's exactly right. Well, anyway, that was a big weekend for coon hunting, and then boom, they come right back. Pro Sport has a truck hunt just this past weekend. Actually, we're recording this on a Monday. We try to get a week ahead on these things so that the people that work their magic with the programs and so forth can make us sound halfway decent. And they had a truck hunt out at Claremore, Oklahoma. Now, history lesson, Corey.
Okay.
See if they're teaching this stuff anymore. Who is the well-known figure in American history that was born in Claremore, Oklahoma?
I don't know a whole lot about Oklahoma.
Let me give you a hint.
Okay.
He said he never met a man that he didn't like. Boy, these teachers in public schools.
They're failing.
Hang on.
You've got...
Okay, let me give you some more hints about him. He was a performer in Wild West shows.
Wild Bill Hitchcock. I have no clue.
You just renamed a figure from Western history. It was
Did
Hickok.
I combine two of them? Or
it
what?
was Hickok.
Oh, Hickok.
No, but it was not Wild Bill Hickok. No.
Oh, geez.
No, as far as I know, this guy never shot anybody. Okay, I'm going to cut to the chase on this. Do you give up?
I thoroughly give up.
Okay. Well, he actually was in movies, and he died in a plane crash with a famous journalist or photographer named Wiley Carroll, I believe his name was, and I believe it was in Alaska. Now, it might have been Montana, somewhere out west. And I give you one more chance at his name.
Are you Googling it, Steve?
No. We'll be right back with the commercial break while Fielder remembers the name of the guy.
The ramblings of a madman, people.
Hold on just a minute. I can't believe it, but I just forgot the guy's name. It'll come back to me.
I guess
everybody knows this guy. He was one of the most beloved writers and he was kind of like a Paul Harvey of his day. He wrote little news columns syndicated all over the country. And
he sounds like a heck of a guy. I'll give you that. I guess this is going to be the question on the spin for the Coon Squalor this week.
his last name was Rogers. Did you ever hear of Will Rogers?
It's not. Oh no.
Hmm?
No.
Never heard of it. Google
Beyond
it.
my time.
Google it. You got that extra screen right there.
Yeah.
Do the Wikipedia and see what it says.
Okay. You said Will Rogers.
Will.
Okay.
And there's a museum there in Claremore, Oklahoma.
Okay. Well, if you were as in the dark as I was, is it William Penn Adair Rogers?
Okay. And what does it say? Where was he born?
Was an American performer, actor, and humorous social commentator. He was born as a citizen of the Cherokee Nation in the Indian Territory, now part of Oklahoma, and is known as Oklahoma's favorite son.
There you go.
It says that he did 50 silent films, Steve. How many silent films do you think I've watched in my entire life? Not 50.
Well, if you were a guy that wanted to, further his education, expand his horizons, you'd be watching Charlie and Laurel and Hardy and all those people. But anyway, I thought I'd throw a little history lesson in it for you. Will Rogers I have a book of his writings, and if you can pick up one on eBay, get it, because it's very humorous. He was always lampooning the politicians of the day on both sides of the fence. But anyway, Claremore, Oklahoma, I went out there for American Redbone Days one time when I was at UKC in June, and it was so stinking hot you could not breathe. But I did go to the Will Rogers Museum. And
No kidding.
It was really, really neat. But I said all that, and I don't know why, to say that there was a truck hunt there this last weekend.
We're going to cut to the chase now.
That's right. And I don't know, is this what you call poetic justice or something? I don't know. At the Joy Super Hunt, Lady won the hunt, and the dog that she beat was the Tank 2 dog, owned by Joey. What's Joey's last name? Or hunted by Joey.
I got to Google it.
Do you? I'll get your magic Google machine there. See, that's another reason, friends, that I brought this guy along, because he's got skills.
Yes. Googling skills.
The Google machine.
Yes, sir.
But at any rate, while you're looking that up, I'll get to this story. He, of course, Lone Pine Lady was the winner. The dog Tank 2 was not. But at the truck hunt last weekend in the semifinals, Lady and Tank 2 drew out again. And this time, guess what? Tank 2 won the cast and made it to the finals. So it just goes to show that old West Virginia saying rings true. The sun doesn't shine on the same dog's backside every day.
Not every day.
Not every day. Well, at any rate, our listeners know who he is, and he knows who he is.
All right, Steve, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So everybody that knows me knows that I'm a very staunch UKC guy. I've never been a money hunter. I've dabbled in PKC a little bit. You'll see I probably have about $150 lifetime earnings in my on my resume, But one thing that I've never understood is, how do they get the trucks for these hunts? Can you explain that?
How
to
do they get
me
the
and
truck?
some of,
Well,
yeah.
now, like these trucks, their entry fee is healthy enough that there's money to buy a truck and pay the guides, the judges, or whatever, and some left over for the kitty, So it's all entry fee driven. So basically, we're hunting for our own money, and that's how it works. Now, as we go back to my PKC days, and I don't know if it's still this way or not, but they had 2 truck hunts a year.
Okay.
They had a handler's hunt, and then they had a pup hunt. One was like the first weekend in, I'm going to say March, and the other April, or it was February and March. I don't remember exactly. But they were held at the casino in Lula, Mississippi. Go past that every time I go to the White River. That's where we cross the Mississippi River, Lula on the Mississippi side and Helena, Arkansas on the Arkansas side. But anyway, there was the escrow from all of these pups hunting in these pup derbies and running for these pup tickets paid for one of those trucks. And then I was able to convince dog food manufacturer to come in and pick up the tab for the other truck.
Okay.
And give a shameless plug here. That was at that time Ralston Purina, later Nestle Purina Company. So that's how PKC used to do it. I assume they still do, through the escrow accounts and through sponsorship.
Okay.
But
Well, hey, not to change subjects on you here, but the name of that handler on Tank 2, owner handler, is Joey Craver.
Craver, thank you very much. Joey, my apologies, my friend.
So lady got a truck. So if Randy Smith and John Strickland are partners on this dog, I'm assuming they're the only 2 that are on her registered owners, or are there more? How did they decide who gets the truck?
Well, they worked that out, and the lucky recipient of that truck that they won. Now, they didn't win a truck for the Joy Shootout or Joy Super Hunt, but Lady did indeed win a truck.
Right.
And I think it may have been at Claremore last year.
Okay.
But I saw that truck, and it's a silver Nissan, and it's sitting in the garage waiting for Cole Smith to get old enough to get his license, and Cole is the owner of that truck.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I don't know what John and Randy worked out on that, but anyway, Randy ended up with the truck.
That's just one of the things that I always think about way too hard, because I've never had a dog in well, I've had dogs in partnership with people, but I've never had a dog good enough, that won a truck hunt or anything like that. I always wondered, I'm like, how the heck do you decide who gets that truck at the end of the day, especially if you got 4 owners on there?
Well, I had some experience with that sort of thing in my years in Michigan, working with the Michigan Bear Hunters. We always had a year-long raffle, and they'd give away a nice four-wheeler or snow machine, or, a snowmobile to those of you who live down under the bridge, you trolls. But when we started the Heartland Classic, it first started as an AKC hunt when I was with them. And we held it in Tomah, Wisconsin, and working with those people there. And Erica Froming was one of the people that I worked with. And Gomer. Man, I tell you, this is all morning stuff for me, and it's getting well on to the evening. And man, my brain cells are not firing. But anyway, the way they did it up there is they went out and bought 2 4-wheelers.
Okay.
They found a dealer that would deal with it. And back in that day when we first started, I think they would give them $5,000 a pop for those machines. So that was 10 grand.
Wow.
So what they did was they sold enough raffle tickets to pay for both machines. They gave one to the raffle winner, and the other one went to the hunt winner. So that's how they, financed giving away a 4-wheeler, and it kind of, became known up in that area as the Wheeler Hunt. You've been up there to that one, haven't you?
Heartland Classic. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite events to go to.
Yep.
When I went up there the first time, that was when I kind of got to meet everybody. I met Erica, my good friend Jay Leahy, just so many good people. That's really a unique area of the country because that is like a microcosm for dual champion dogs. Dogs that have acquired both a bench show and a night hunt title, or even like a quad champion or quad grand champion when you throw in the water race and field trial events. That's the heartland for it, honestly. You go up there and everything is a quad champion or at least a dual. It's insane.
Yeah, a lot of good hounds up there. Great coon hunting. We spent some time there at Tomah, and then we really didn't have the locals club support there. And of course, in those days, it was an AKC event, and there was a very loyal UKC club there in that area that really kind of didn't want it, to be honest. And so anyway, we went over to Iowa, to Nashua, Iowa, and held it over there a few years. And then when I retired and all, at some point there, it swung back over to UKC and has done very, very well. And of course, Erica and Matt have a family, and so we have to kind of put some of these things on the back burner. But she was a phenomenal leader. I remember when I encouraged her to take over as president of the Heartland Association, and she was a little, she didn't know. She was unsure about it. And I said, "You're the perfect person for this job because these people will follow you. They like you." And of course, Erica's a hunter. I mean, she and I knew her dad, Eric Froming, worked with me on one of the first year we had zone hunts for the World Championship. We had one in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and that's when I met her dad. Unfortunately, he passed with a heart situation at a much too early age. But anyway, that's chasing a rabbit there. But the Heartland Classic funded their 4-wheeler giveaways by a raffle. So
I almost had to borrow a 4-wheeler to get home from there one year. It was the last year.
That's a long ride on a 4-wheeler, Bubba.
Well, it was a long ride in the truck I was driving. I went out there in 2019, and I think that was the last year Erica was kind of the one coordinating the event. It was either that year or the year after she handed off the reins to someone else. But anyways, so I had a little Ford Ranger pickup truck, and I drove it out to Wisconsin, and I went, through Chicago and all that good stuff. And my check engine light kept coming on the entire time I was on my way out there, and I could not figure out for the life of me what was going on. Well, lo and behold, I get to Wisconsin, I get to Mineral Point, I get to the grounds, I shut off my truck. I can't get it started again. I'm like, what the heck's
Wonder
going on?
why they put those check engine lights on a vehicle.
You know,
anyway.
I'm not quite sure why, but they're useful. I found out. So, you know, we kind of run down through the gauntlet of things that could be wrong with it. I went and bought a new battery for it. And here, what was happening was my alternator had gone. It was on its last leg.
It
sitting
wasn't
on-
alternating
no,
anymore.
no. It was on its last leg while I was in Mineral Point, and I had one of the guys there finally got it started, and this was Sunday morning or whatever after the Final Four and everything like that, and he looked at me and he said, "You get heading back to Pennsylvania and you don't turn this truck off until you get home." And I said, "Oh, Lordy." So I thought I was being brilliant. I wanted to ensure that I didn't go through Chicago because that was start and stop traffic, and my alternator was so bad my headlights would brighten up and then they dim. They brighten up and they dim. So I was like, well, I'm going to go south. I'm going to go south into Iowa, and then I'm not going to head east until I get until I'm
To the
west
Gulf of Mexico.
well, until I'm west of like Fort Wayne, Indiana, you know, and then I'll run it back up to Chicago. Well, what I didn't realize was all highways in Illinois lead to Chicago. There aren't very many that run east to west. So I went probably an hour out of my way through Iowa. And I did not have to do that because I ended up going through Chicago anyway.
Anyway.
Long story short, I made it home and the truck died as soon as I got in my driveway.
Wow. Well, here's a dad joke.
Okay.
My friend Bubba back in West Virginia, I used to write about him in the magazines. Bubba lived up the hollow there, and he got 1,000 feet of this orange extension cord and ran it down to the widow Jones' house, who lived in the mouth of the hollow there, and she had electricity. So he was able to plug up his computer, and then he started sending emails and all. So, but anyway, Bubba told about the time that he went out to Texas, and this rancher was trying to show him around, and he took Bubba out there, and he waved his hand across this huge expanse of land, and he says, "Bubba, do you know that I can't get in my truck and drive across my ranch in a whole day's time?" And Bubba said, "Buddy, I know what you mean. I got a truck just like that." So that was Corey's truck, right? Heath Hyatt, my buddy Heath Hyatt's got a story like that too, about on a bear hunting trip up in Canada or New York, upstate New York, I think, and calling his dad and saying, "You got to come get me. The truck won't run." And he got the thing started. I don't think he had any. I don't know what, it was crazy, but Heath can tell. He's told it on his podcast before, but. Yeah. Those check engine lights, there's a reason for them. I haven't figured it out. Now, I'm not trying to tell you I know, but
Fair enough.
They say you don't pay a mechanic $100 an hour to turn a screw. You pay him to know how much to turn the screw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I can tell you, I certainly needed a mechanic that day.
I got you. Hey.
Yes, sir.
Full cry.
Yes, sir.
We mentioned the hat. Did I mention the hat earlier?
You did.
Or not?
It looks great on you, honestly.
Yeah. Well, tell us about this Full Cry gig you got going.
Oh, the Full Cry gig.
Well, whatever. You and Jason have been kind of getting your heads together. I don't know how much you can tell. Maybe I'm letting the cat out of the bag, but
maybe
anything
I might be your Huckleberry, though. So, well, basically, what my understanding is that Jason has been working on a podcast for Full Cry. And that's something that I'm going to be helping him with to a certain extent. And it's basically going to be a collection of vintage articles that are going to be read on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis. And it's just going to showcase some of the great stories that Full Cry has already published. And hopefully there will be enough interest in that and enough commentary from the people who are listening that they'll get a fair amount of input as to what's put on that podcast or what's read on that podcast. And potentially it will go into some deep dive kind of material where we sit down and kind of unpack certain categories or topics of interest with the general populace. And I think it's going to be really great. I think it's a major step forward in the stewardship of our sport, because a lot of what the print magazines have done for us in the past is archive our history, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be bringing you guys tidbits of our history each week in the form of a 20 to 30 minute podcast. And I think it's going to be really great. I think it's going to be really well received. I think it's different than what else is out there right now. And I think that if you want to know any more about it, you're just going to have to wait until Jason releases the little podcast we recorded to kind of outline everything that's going on. But that's a very brief synopsis.
I think that's a great synopsis there. And speaking to Jason, as I do regularly, because this podcast is on the W Hunting Supply platform, and of course we keep trying to tell people out there, if they want, they don't have to go on the W or the Houndcast W Supply platform, our network, for this podcast now. It is standalone. You can go Google it anywhere, search for it anywhere that you get your podcasts, Spotify or wherever. But and there's no separation from W, but it's just makes it easier to have it over here on its own little table. But in talking to Jason, he'll tell you right up front that he looks at himself as being a steward of this information, of this great heritage that we have, and wants to see it go forward. And if you met the Doobies, these are sincere people. They're not going to blow much smoke. And, from the get-go, that was the appeal to them, to buy Full Cry and to continue publishing it, because they just did not want to see this tradition die.
Well, and very much like what you're doing on your platform is you are recounting the audible stories of people that may not have written things down over time, or people might not know a whole lot about them, but they've had a major impact on the sport. Jason and Danny are kind of doing the same thing on the flip side of the coin. They're ensuring that we have this information stored in two different places. So we have the print copies already, the many archives of hard copy Full Cry magazines that exist right now. But as an insurance policy, we need to have it on some kind of platform, like a podcast, for example. We need the more access that we have to this information, the better. And the more likely that people will remember it and utilize it for good.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, I applaud you and Jason for tackling this, and we'll be talking about it from time to time, because I'm going to be picking your brain to find out what's going on over there, that we can tell folks about. So, I told Jason that. I said, I'm going to want to be talking about this, because magazines are near and dear to my heart. You know?
Absolutely.
I had to kind of oversee a couple of them back through the years, and love them myself. And
You know,
got
it's
my
funny you
new
mention that.
copy. Got
It's
my
funny.
new copy. I'm down here in Florida, so that's about as far away from Oregon as you can get.
Oh yeah.
And so I don't get my magazine till everybody else is on Facebook bragging about how good it is. But I did finally get mine. I think it was last week, and I always just kind of browse them first and make mental notes of what I want to read. When I get time. And I haven't really drilled down into this one yet, but there's a lot of good stuff in there, I'm sure. And the covers are so cool. I love the way they're laying this thing out, and makes you proud. Makes you
Yeah.
proud of the sport.
You and Jason are really turning me into a hoarder because I now, well, just this past weekend, I was fortunate enough that I received a stash of, I'll call them vintage, but they're not really vintage yet, but they will be vintage magazines from a wonderful widow of a man that was a coon hunter in my local area, Mr. Ed Regal. And he was from Conneautville, or Springboro, Pennsylvania, excuse me, which is just about, a little shy of an hour north.
Okay, was he an English fancier?
That's a good question. I know that he had walkers when he passed away, but he may have been. I don't know Ed much, in my younger years, but I am now the proud owner of his entire library of Coonhound Bloodlines, American Cooners, Full Cries, and I have yet to go through all of them. I went through 2 boxes and I have 75 magazines to look through already. So,
well, one of the things I enjoyed in my UKC days was the public library that was there. It's now, I think, office space or maybe a conference room or whatever. We used it as a conference room too. But as you walk in the lobby and started down the hall toward the corner, down toward registration and that way, the first room on the left was the library, a large room. I think when you were there, there's probably offices in there, maybe.
I think
Do you have cubicles in there?
Yeah, I think that room was turned into the president's office at that point.
Oh, okay. Well, when I was there, Fred Miller's office was down on the corner.
Oh,
okay. And you went all the way to the end of the hall, and on the left, that was the head shed. That was Fred's office. But anyway, we kept all these old magazines cataloged in there. We had these cardboard tray type deals where you could sit the magazines in them and you could read the spine on the magazine as to the date and the issue and all. And that was a valuable source of material for the research that I had to do on especially the special breed issues when we started those. But I still love that. They kind of laughed or were a little bit amazed. I think when I was at PKC, I had a 2-room suite in an office complex there in Portage, Michigan, when I left UKC, and I stayed there all the time that I was with PKC. And I had all my magazines cataloged that way. My American Cooner, Full Cry, Coonhound Bloodlines, and so if I needed information or maybe a rule interpretation that I'd made at one time or another, it was all right there at my fingertips. I used to be an organized guy, Corey.
Well, there was a time or two that Alan had to come looking for me down in the cellar. The library, the archives you're referring to, by the time I was there in Kalamazoo, they had moved to the basement. So you had to go all the way down to the dingy basement just to find the magazine you were looking for. But I spent a lot of time down there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I used to go down there and dig through the old registration records. I love that stuff. And I found the dog. Now, here we go again. I'm going to give you another history lesson, young man.
Okay. Oh, I did so
Did you
wrong.
ever see the TV show The Young Rascals? The Little Rascals.
Oh, yeah. Little Rascals.
The Little Rascals. Spanky and our gang, that
Yep.
Darla, Buckwheat, all those. Petey, the dog that they had on those shows, was an American Pit Bull Terrier that was registered with the United Kennel Club.
No kidding.
And I went down and I found Petey's registration record.
Oh, my God.
They drew a circle around his eye. If you've ever seen the show, he had a black circle drawn around his eye. But just weird stuff like that always fascinated me.
Oh, yeah. There's some cool stuff down there that a lot of people don't know about.
I got to say this, and I may have said this on a podcast before. When I went to AKC, I was responsible for keeping all the old ACHA records in a warehouse there in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I think there was 300 and some boxes of these actual registration records of ACHA. So I went back and I could find those old dogs of history, those old ACHA world champions and all that, And I'd go down about once a year. We paid rent on that warehouse space, just to keep those records. I hope they've kept them now. I don't. They hired an archivist to archive all the old AKC stuff, but I think it was mostly in the New York office, the dog show stuff. So I don't know how much emphasis they'd put on these coonhound records, but they sure were important to me. I loved it.
Absolutely. Now, they have to have a substantial library, I would imagine, the American Kennel Club, just in general.
Well, yeah, they do. And I don't know. They moved when I was there. They were on Madison Avenue and occupied a whole floor in a skyscraper building there. But they've since moved to Park Avenue. They're Midtown Manhattan all the way,
Oh, boy.
Well, yeah, just where a redneck coon herder from West Virginia loved to be.
Yeah.
But, that was an interesting gig. Well, listen, Corey, we talked a little bit about, I wanted to touch on this with you because you and I get to talk shop a little bit because we both worked in similar jobs there at various times. And we talked a little bit earlier about rules, interpreting rules and things like that. And when I was at UKC, I was told right away that I would need to write a column called Coon Talk that was formerly written by Andy Johnson, who was an employee there and was kind of the manager of the field operations department before the thing split out. And of course, I was Coonhounds only. But that was just a friendly sort of editorial type column. It could be about anything. And I wrote one of my favorite stories ever when I wrote Coon Talk. And I want to dig that out sometime. And it would bear reading. And it was about a coon club that was going under. And it met at the local country store. And they held the final meeting to discuss why they were, that they were going to disband the club, what they were going to do with the money, why they were doing it. And each one of the players in the story had his own version of why the club failed.
Oh, wow.
And they talked about this around the room. And there's a young kid there that had been saving up his money from mowing lawns and doing errands and so forth to buy a coonhound puppy. And he had the folded up ad in his pocket he'd been carrying around. And of course, now that there's no club, there's no reason for him to buy the puppy. And that he's going to just use that money down at the arcade.
Oh,
And it really, I mean, I was feeling that at that time, a passion for the sport and all. And that was one of my favorite stories that I ever did. And I never really put it, I guess it was work for hire, I guess, with UKC, and it's in a magazine back there somewhere. But anyway,
it's
but
funny. It's funny that you mentioned that, because that was one thing. That was one criteria to me getting hired, was they asked me to just write a story, and so they could get a feel for my writing style. And I wrote about. They have it up there in an archive folder somewhere, but I wrote a story about hunting with my grandpa's coon dog after he had passed away, and it was kind of more of a poetic type story.
Mhm.
It was, really tugged on the heartstrings, and I think that helped
Oh,
me
yeah.
get the job.
Somewhere along the line, I always ended up with some kind of a moral in my articles that I wrote.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I always felt like that I was surveying everything from the moral high ground, but they just kind of worked out that way. There had kind of a purpose to the article,
Well, and I
And
think that illustrates a good point to make, in the fact that as coon hunters, we consider ourselves sportsmen, and sportsmen act with integrity, right? So it's not uncommon for us to think about the moral implications of things, or to think about, try to think things through, and think them through in a logical way, and in a fair way. And I think that transcribes into a lot of things that we do, whether we're writing or we're competing. It should, anyway.
yeah, there's always that, fine line. You don't want to appear to be sanctimonious. You don't want to appear to be holier than thou. But
Yeah,
that doesn't mean you have to compromise your standards,
that's exactly it.
And that always worked in my favor, I think, over the years. Because, I learned early on that your reputation is something that, well, I guess someone could lie about you and it would, damage your reputation. But if all things were factual, our reputation is something that if we choose to give it away, that's all up to us.
Yeah,
Nobody can really take my integrity away from me.
exactly.
All things being factual, nobody can take that. If I lose it, it's because I choose to lose it
Well, and
through
that's
my actions or words.
yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about integrity is rooted in truth. So the more that we act with integrity, the more that we're honest with ourselves and those around us. And that's the whole point in raising purebred dogs, or competing in these coon hunting events, or what have you, is we need accurate records to make the best decisions possible. And when we can rely on the reproducers list, or we can rely on the papers that are sent to our mailbox, we can ensure that we are breeding, or that we're breeding for quality, we're competing with quality. There's just so many facets that stem from that. And I think you've made a good point there.
Well, someone in the realm of politics once coined a phrase that was used a lot. Well, what difference does it make? But if your business is records, shouldn't those records be accurate?
That's exactly it.
And shouldn't that it translates to a lot of different areas? Shouldn't the dogs that are represented on that record be the dogs that the words say they are?
Absolutely.
And shouldn't the wins on a dog's championship record be indicative of the dog following the rules and earning those points under those rules? Is that unfair to ask that?
Probably. Not.
People that play loosely with rules, to me, I got into these discussions way back in my breed association when it came to breed standard issues. Plot dogs. What's too much white? Why should we care if they got white on them? Why should we care if they're solid color or they're striped? Why should we care? Because the standard says they're supposed to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't adhere to that standard, then why don't we just throw the standard out the window and just do whatever we want?
Exactly.
But, way back in fighting the animal rights movement, a term that, came to the front and we used often was there are no rights without responsibility.
Yeah.
And they talked about animal rights. Excuse me. If an animal can't be responsible for his actions, how can he have rights?
Right.
A dog's not responsible for trespassing on somebody else's land just because there's a posted sign there.
Nor does he care.
Yeah. And he can't be responsible. If he can't be responsible, he doesn't have the right to do it. Our rights that we're given through our articles of government bear responsibility with them.
And that's just the same as when you look at a breed organization that's working on preserving a breed of particular interest. Those rules aren't arbitrary. They're not there to exclude people or exclude individual dogs. They're there to preserve. They're there for the art of preservation. And I see a lot of people out there, not so much in our sport, but more along the lines of our everyday folks out there. You can call your dog whatever you want to call it. If you think you have a plot hound, you go ahead and call it a plot hound. That's your right as an American citizen. You can do that all day long. But if you want to have a legitimate plot hound, then you have to follow the rules and the standards that are set forth by the people who were instrumental in constructing the breed or the people who are instrumental in preserving the breed.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah, I've always been that way. I've been a rules person. I've been a standards person. Well, it's easier.
Yeah.
And I've laughed about on this podcast to say, when I went to work with Fred Miller, who was then president of UKC, he said, Steve, we don't make deals with people, okay? Because we can't remember, we go by the rules. We spend all this time having a rules committee, these long meetings into the wee hours of the morning and publishing all these great expense and all to, make sure that that the playing field's level. Everybody gets the same opportunity, Anyway, are you getting a little feedback on me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you
feedback?
good.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
yeah. That's good. Well, anyway, you and I both sat in a capacity or a position where we had to interpret rules, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you do that as part of your job?
Whenever Alan wasn't in the office, I did. No, yeah.
The buck passes, huh?
Yeah, exactly. When the cat's away, the mice will play,
Oh, so. Yeah. Well, Yeah, I took that real seriously when I started that. Years ago in American Cooner Magazine, Manfred Craver, who I've talked about on this podcast before, he was a longtime manager of Autumn Oaks, Redbone guy from Greencastle, Indiana, real class gentleman, always wore a sport coat, little fedora hat, all buttoned up, just really super, super guy. But anyway, he started the Rules Corner in American Cooner Magazine, and he would entertain letters from people, much like John Wick did when he wrote his book. But John was dealing with more with training issues and puppy issues and things like that. So Manfred started Rules Committee, and then later the guy that won the first Autumn Oaks, Dale Brandenburger, a plot guy, he picked it up and wrote it for many, many years. But the problem with that was neither one of those were actually UKC employees, and they weren't always taking the position of the registry. So I guess I became the first guy to sit there and say, okay, this is chapter and verse from UKC. This is official. This, those guys did a phenomenal job. They did a lot of good to help standardize things and keep the hunts running fairly smoothly. But for the first time, then we had an official voice of UKC concerning the rules, and I always, I always I was more of a will and shall kind of guy than a may or should kind of guy when I gave interpretations. I haven't always seen it to be that way down through the years. But, if the rule says it, that's the way it is. It's the rule. When I was doing legislative work, and we were fighting an issue like a recreational trespass law or something like that, and invariably we'd have a member of the Farm Bureau representing, the farmers and the landowners and stuff. And if a question came up, they just went to their manual. And whatever the manual said, that was their position, period.
Right.
The manual says thus and so, that's our position. It's not what I think. It's not what should be.
It's not
It's
how
not
I
what
feel.
may be.
Yeah.
It's what the manual says.
Right.
And I respected that. Gosh, it makes your life so much easier.
Well, speaking
And
of
for
that,
those of you out there that are people of faith, and I know Corey and I both are, we have a manual. That black book that's been passed down from grandma that sits on the coffee table, that's a manual.
Yes, sir.
And the word's in there, and the instructions are there, and it's truth, and it's the way it's supposed to be, and the way it's going to be. We're not going to change it.
Well,
anyway,
that's
your little sermonette for today. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and you do not have to send an offering. Okay?
Well, that was good. I like that analogy, but that's going to be hard to follow up. Speaking of the great book and rule books and interpretations, when I came on to start recording with you, you had made mention about possibly passing some, not judgment, but giving our 2 cents on some questions that had been posed on the Coon Hunting Conversations Facebook page. And that's what I think we're going to end on, is we're going to dive into a couple of our participant viewers' questions, and you're going to get our take on what we think.
Yeah, absolutely. You got the for those of you who don't know, it started the Coon Hunting Conversations group page on Facebook. I don't know. It's been 3 or 4 years now. I think there's 11,400 members or 300 or something like that.
11,000.
Pardon me?
11,000 on the dot.
On the dot. Okay.
On the dot.
Well, and the idea with that all along was provide a place where guys could come and post their questions or make their comments without retribution, without the keyboard commandos attacking. And so we again put some rules with the site. No selling of any products. We let it slide a little bit for advertisements that we think are of the general interest to the people that come on there, but no used Garmin collars and broken antennas and all that stuff. But anyway, there's a lot of good stuff on there, and I urge you to go to Facebook and join the group if you don't know about it already. Coon Hunting Conversations. It's for everybody. We invite you to post often, and you get a lot of information off there. Okay, Corey, I'm going to shut up.
I was
That's your
wondering how
job
long
to
we were
keep
gonna
me
go with
quiet.
Well, this is my first day on the job, so cut me a little slack, would you? I'm trying to find the question that I wanted to bring up. I'm having to scroll through back to where I was holding my place here, but I should find it here shortly. This is
Hey,
real,
since you
real
taught me how to do this, I'm going to jump over here
Oh my
and see if
god!
I can help you.
I'd like
We are high tech rednecks here, folks. Some of us are more so than others. Corey's more high tech, and I'm more redneck. So there we go.
Okay, so I got the first question, and I'm gonna lob this one up in the air. I'm gonna let Steve respond first, and then I'll kind of come in at the tail end. No pun intended. This first question comes from a man named Daniel Phillips. It was posted on February 22nd at 10:24 a.m. So Daniel writes, I've knocked coons out to the dogs my whole life, and I've heard some folks don't, and it doesn't make a difference. So what's everyone's opinion? Does knocking coons out to the dogs make them better dogs? So in layman's terms, what that means is, do you need to harvest a raccoon in order for your dog to understand that it's done a good job? Can you leave the raccoon in the tree, or do you need to harvest it for your dog to understand the difference and be rewarded one way or the other? So Steve, let's hear your response on that.
Okay, that's an old one. It's been around forever. Been tossed back and forth across more clubhouse tables and generated more coffee sales than probably anything in the sport of coon hunting. Do you need to knock out coons to the dogs? A very famous coon hunter is not real active anymore, but you would know him immediately if I were to give his name. Said, he believed that you should always give the dog the coon. And his follow-up to that was, if you don't like my methods, beat my record. And this guy has done a tremendous amount of winning over the years. I didn't really, I grew up with this philosophy. You need to knock the coon out, especially to a young dog. But I came from a home where the man in charge, who was my dad, there was no question that he was in charge. He said, if you go out and you take coons out of season and you get caught, that's 100% on you.
Oh, yeah.
Do not call me. I'm not in your corner on that. I'm telling you, you leave that gun at home until the season's in. And that's what he lived by. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But I've always been of the opinion that taking an occasional coon down to a young dog helps them along their early stages of their development. Some dogs need more than others. Some dogs seem to be programmed, it's in their DNA that they got to have fur. And if they don't get that fur, they're going to think of something else to do. There's other dogs, like the Bronco dog that I had years ago. I harvested a coon for him in February, right at the end of the season. I hunted him all summer long in hunts, finished him out, and did not harvest a coon to him until the following fall. All summer long, he never had fur in his mouth unless he caught it on the ground somewhere and I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So, and I know that Jerry Mall, Jerry's a good friend. I worked with Jerry. He was a great guy to work with. Jerry is a guy that believes in, sparsely taking coons down to dogs.
Mhm.
And I think Jerry and maybe many other trainers know that there are some pitfalls that come along with harvesting coons. And I don't want to dominate this answer, Corey, but things like going back to trees
Mhm.
and the rules. If you're in the night hunt, there's a penalty structure. If you go back to a tree that's been scored too many times, you can be scratched.
Oh, yeah.
You can be minus and/or scratched. So that causes that problem. I remember a young plot female in Ohio, in eastern Ohio, when I hunted there back in the mid-'70s, that we shot so many coons out. I was hunting with a pleasure hunter that never took his dog off the chain during the off season. And as soon as the season came in, he hunted just about every night. I made sure he did because I was sitting in his driveway every night at dark. Let's go hunting. And in fact, he used to laugh about that. But she got so many coons out to her, she just started walking around looking up in the air.
Yeah.
She was just waiting for a coon to fall.
Got a cricket in her neck.
Yeah. So I think, it's not a cop-out to say some dogs do need more game than others. No doubt that's true. But the way dogs are bred today, if I were to have to choose and someone say, okay, Steve, you can either kill no coons to your dog, to this dog you're starting, or you have to kill every coon to the dog that it trees, I'd choose the first. I would choose no coons.
Sure. Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. In that whole discussion, I personally think that it depends greatly on the individual dog. So I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule that's going to encompass 90% of the general populace of coonhounds in the country. I think that what you need to do as a responsible trainer is you need to give your dog that interaction. I don't think anybody doubts that, and I don't think that anybody would argue with that. But multiple interactions or any interactions past that point, I think you need to gauge it on your dog's reaction. How's your dog reacting to this interaction? Do you think it's in his best interest or her best interest to continue this, or what have you? Now, I don't have the same philosophy for myself. If I'm going coon hunting in that season, it's coming down, whether the dogs interact with it or not.
If it's brown, it's down, right?
So, yeah, I live to thin coons out, and I've been blessed and privileged to live in a part of the country where I can practice that to my heart's content. Now, that doesn't mean that all of my dogs are going to be getting a piece of that pie. And to a certain extent, you really don't want your dogs interacting with the game at hand. For a lot of reasons. There's health reasons involved with that even. And obviously that there is some of that interaction that takes place. But if I had to choose between the two, I don't know that I could. I think that it's all up to the interpretation of the moment.
Well, I don't want to leave the impression at all that I don't like to harvest raccoons. When the season comes in, nobody likes to put that 22 in the truck more than me and feel that pill bottle full of 22 shells rattling in my pocket.
Yeah.
And when the dog does a good job, harvest it as humanely as I can. And I believe that's why I carry a rifle. I'm not one that likes to force a dog to dispatch the coon. Too many issues can crop up out of that.
Oh yeah.
Injuries predominantly. But no, I love coon hunting, coon season. I loved it. I loved it back in the mountains. In the early part of the year, our season came in October. The leaves were still fairly thick on the trees, those tall oaks in the mountains. Carried a 12 gauge shotgun with number 4 shot.
Oh yeah.
I meant to, if those dogs treat that coon, I meant to roll him out now for sure.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that's the reason that coon hunting skipped a generation in my family, because my grandfather, at a certain point in time in my dad's life, realized that, hey, I have a strong, able-bodied son to climb these trees and shake these coons out. So my dad
not advised.
Yeah.
That's a good opportunity for a public service announcement. Do not climb trees, fellas.
No.
I don't care if you are Tarzan's younger brother, and swinging through grapevines is your cup of tea. Too many coon hunters, in my experience, were either in wheelchairs for life or passed on because they fell out of a tree trying to shake a coon out of a tree.
And there are plenty of
just
stories.
Don't do it. Pardon?
And there are plenty of stories of that happening to dogs nowadays. So we certainly don't advocate or recommend that.
You mentioned that. I just my friend Keston Jesse there in Virginia, he and I have that Lone Pine Power Pack bred dog together, and he was showing me some pictures, a FaceTime in the woods. I think it was last night. Several trees, that have blown over, but they hadn't blown all the way over.
Ooh.
They got caught by another tree, and it's like a 45-degree angle, and those are custom made for a coon run that goes up one of those deals. A hound's going to go up right behind them. They're going to get up there. They're not going to be able to turn around in some cases. They're going to fall out. A good friend, Don Moffitt from North Carolina, we see him each year at the White River. He had a good dog, young dog, killed just before White River time this year that fell out of a tree. And there's nothing he could do. He knew when he got to her that she was in a predicament that she was not going to survive.
Yeah.
And indeed she didn't. But the dogs are one thing, but we can decide whether or not to climb that tree.
Oh, yeah. Well, Steve, do we got time for one more?
Yeah, let's do one more. Let's do one more.
Why don't you pick one out, and we'll kind of give a brief synopsis on that.
Okay, you're going to make me do this. Wow. Okay. Where was the one that we talked about before about the guy's name was it Johnson?
Let me see here. I'm going to do some scrolling.
We'll find them here. Just there's an interesting picture someone posted on with a coon with a red plastic device around his foot. Did you see that?
I did see that.
Yeah, it reminded me of one of those cuff-like traps. That,
did we figure out what that was?
Yeah. Did you figure it out?
No, the best answer I saw was that it looked like the cap off of a creamer bottle.
Exactly.
Is that what it was?
A cap off of a what is it called? The common creamer.
Half and half.
Coffee mate. Coffee mate flavored creamer top, a red one, which probably meant it was hazelnut, which is what I like.
Okay, I've got the one you were looking at. You were looking for. pulled up.
All right, let's do that one, and then I've got another little one here that we might hit just for a minute.
Okay, so the next submission that we have coming from the Facebook page is Johnny Jefferson. Posted 3 days ago. Just for conversation, if you had a young dog that's almost 2 years old, was really doing good, except the treeing part, would you lay him up for a few weeks and start over, or would you continue to hunt him hard, hoping it just clicks one night? Question mark.
You take that one, Corey.
Okay. Well, I think that kind of building off of the point I made with shooting coons out to dogs, I think that every dog is an individual. And I don't think that, regardless of how good our genetics are, I don't believe that they're all going to start at the same exact time under the same exact circumstances in the same exact ways. So in this particular situation, if I have a young dog that's doing good, going out there getting struck, running good with the older dogs, maybe doing a little bit on his own, having a little trouble with the treeing end of things, it just depends on how hard you're hunting this dog. If I had to guess, I would say this dog's getting hunted regularly, and it might be good in that particular situation to lay that dog up a little bit, get him excited about what he's doing again, and maybe rejuvenate some interest that young dog's going to have at the tree. If the dog's not being hunted much and you're still seeing him weak in that particular aspect, I would probably say that maybe that dog is going to be starting in that particular aspect a little bit later, and just take your time. I don't think that it's anything that we have to lay the dog up for. I think it's just a matter of patience.
Well, patience is the key to most everything, and I'm already talking myself hoarse, Corey. Just a moment.
You've been treeing too long.
I've been what?
You've been treeing too long.
Treeing too long. I need some Chloraseptic or something. Which, that's another example of what you see on coon hunting conversations, guys, these remedies for dogs that are hoarse. One guy the other day said, that's all a bunch of crap. Just keep him from barking and he'll be all right.
That's number one.
Yeah. Well, I've been through this some, and I know this is going to sound like, right fielder. I call BS on that. But down through the years, I never really had that problem because these plot dogs that we had, they usually start treeing before they'd even run a track.
Mm-hmm.
They were just natural tree dogs. And pretty darn accurate at it, too, because they wanted the game. They liked to get that game. But you can do that. We try all these things. Keston and I have been through that with a few pups. We had one that would tree her head off and wouldn't hunt a lick. We had another one that would run in a track and hunt the backside out of the dark and wouldn't tree. And so you run into these situations, and some of the general remedies that are used is the jealousy thing. Try to get the dog, or to be actually the true term would be envy rather than jealousy. But anyway, be envious of the other dog that's getting petted at the tree, getting the fun, maybe getting to mouth, the harvested coon, while they sit back here on the leash some distance away and have to sit it out with the idea that that'll trigger them,
Mm-hmm.
And the rolling cage years ago was a thing that was designed to trigger a dog's natural instinct to chase a coon instead of just barking at a coon in an inanimate cage. So we've tried all of these different little things, and some of them will work on some dogs. Some of them won't work on any dog.
Mm-hmm.
Some dogs, no matter what you do, it won't work because they're just simply not ready. And I think, if we could be more patient, like our senior hunters, would tell you back in the day they didn't expect the dog to do much until they were at least 2 years old. Now, a hunter today is not going to wait to a dog to be 2 years old.
You know, I'm gonna throw this out here just because this was a little personal experience I had with not the dog that I'm hunting right now, but the last dog that I trained. I had a pair of litter mates, and they were both directly off of All Grand Camo Man, Buck Hicks's dog, and Justin Nichols' dog out of West Virginia. And I had a male and a female. And the male, he would be what you would consider an early starter. He got going real quick. He was running and training at 8 months, doing a good job. His sister, I'd never heard her bark. Hadn't heard her bark in the kennel, at a coon, nothing, until she was a year old. And I couldn't figure out why I would take these two hunting, and she would be at the tree with her brother, but she wouldn't be training. And what I ended up doing is I took this dog and I showed her a coon by herself, and I just gave her time to process it. I gave her time to interact with it however she wanted to, and I didn't intervene. I just kind of let her run around smelling it and stuff like that. Lord, did she find her voice when she was out there by herself looking at this coon. I mean, she just, and from that point on, that dog treed every single night in the woods. And it's just weird stuff like that sometimes that can trip that trigger that you're talking about there, Johnny. But, it took me, had I not had the patience for that female, then I wouldn't have known what she was capable of. So I think that's the biggest thing is we just have to remember these are pack animals, as independent as we want to make them. Some are just stronger. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for, Steve?
Well, the genetics is there that, I think what the word you're looking for is an excitability level, maybe. Some things don't really excite these pups at an early age. They're more inquisitive. They're more, maybe, I hate to use the word timid, but they're unsure. They're unsettled about it. They don't know what they're supposed to do yet. And then that's where we get this term, they flip the switch. Yeah. All of a sudden, boom, there it is, Patience is the key. Patience is in very short supply in the world that we live in, whether it's at the red light, as soon down here. Thankfully, the New Yorkers that come down here have behaved themselves, and they don't blow the horn like they do back home in New York when the light changes. Yeah. But don't sit there too long because you're going to get a blast. People are always in a hurry, always. And whether it's to get you get that dried out hamburger in the line, and those cold stale fries or whatever. We're in a hurry to get it right now. But, patience is the key to a lot of things. And if we could just be more patient and say, well, it's not the end of the world if that pup didn't start at 8 months old when the season came in. Maybe I had to wait till the spring for her or him to mature enough mentally to understand. Dogs have to be able to understand what you're trying to teach them.
Exactly.
And if they don't understand, they're not going to get it. So we all want the early starter. Yeah, it's great. We brag at the coffee shop or at the clubhouse or on Facebook about how early they start. But I've also heard just as many stories about those dogs that were flashes in the pan. They were brilliant for a short period, like a shooting star, and then they're gone. So, number one, pick a pup that you like the looks of. You'll take more interest in that pup if you like it, if you like the way it acts, if you think it's got some brains, which is very important. but give it time. Just give it time. Invest yourself in that creature. And more times than not, the way they're bred today, they're going to come out of it. So I would echo what you're saying to Johnny there. Just give it some time, and you can try a few of these little things. Like maybe leave it in the dog box, and let the other dog get out there and tree an easy one, and let them sit it out. And sometimes that works. Sometimes that triggers them right then. But you never know for sure what's going to push their button.
Right.
So just take them along. Let them be puppies.
Well,
don't expect too much.
If you guys are interested in Steve and I kind of weighing in on some of the conversations that take place on the Facebook page here, let us know that you're interested and keep contributing to the page. You never know, your question might end up on the airwaves with Steve and Corey.
Yeah, and put a note with your question. I'd like to hear about this on the podcast.
Yeah,
and that'll flag it for us to take a good look at it and see if it's of general interest, to everybody out there.
Well, I don't know about you, Steve, but I need to wrap this up because number one, I've got a baby that needs to get some loving before she goes to bed, and I got a coon dog that needs some loving before I go to bed.
So you're gonna try to get both of those in tonight.
I'm gonna try. It's hard sometimes, but I'm gonna try.
Oh, absolutely, Corey. Appreciate you, brother. It's good to have you on. I'm looking forward to us doing this each week, and we will have some guests. We'll bring some folks on, and people that you'll enjoy, I'm sure. But anyway, from going forward, it's going to be Steve and Corey here with Gone to the Dogs, and we look forward to hearing from you. And if anyone asks you, where's that Pennsylvanian up there and that West Virginia hillbilly? By the way, that's border states. We're neighbors, really.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But just tell them they're gone to the dogs.
Yes, sir.